Welcome back, everyone. CJ213 Corrections. We'll be covering one of the most misunderstood yet most impactful parts of the correctional system, the programs and services, the treatment and rehabilitation programs. When it comes to prison, most people, they picture the security, the, the concertina wire, the fences, the lockdowns, but behind all that, prisons are also responsible for helping people return to society better than they came in. I watched hundreds of men cycle in and out. Some came back again and again, but others, especially those who got into the right programs, they stabilized, they grew, they walked out prepared for something different. Programs do matter. So again, we'll go side by side and just kind of unpack how the modern correctional systems try to rehabilitate people and how those efforts can really play out in a high security environment. So, correctional treatment includes any effort to change an offender's behavior so that they are less likely to commit crime again. Many, many professionals still quote Robert Martinson's famous claim that nothing works. His research, taken at face value, really discouraged programming throughout the 1970s. But scholars scholars later on pointed out that his his uh, his formulated thesis, the way that he looked at programs, um, he looked at the programs that were very poorly designed or very poorly implemented. When programs follow evidence-based models, they do reduce recidivism. I saw both extremes. You had guys that would sign up for every program just to get out of their cell, and it did show. But you also had guys that who were generally engaged, and you could see real progress. You could see a calmer behavior. You see fewer fights, less drug use, more respect for staff. So the big lesson here is rehabilitation does work. It is real, but only when programs are structured, supported, and aligned with the inmate's actual needs. So classification, man, I'm driving this into y'all's head. Classification is so important. Classification is the backbone of everything that comes next. Without accurate classification, the best programs will fail. And classification centers, they assess the risk level, the likelihood of misconduct or reoffending, the criminogenic needs, factors driving criminal behavior, uh, responsivity, how likely the person is to benefit from treatment. And modern systems use tools like risk assessments, needs assessments, the responsibility principle, and century systems, which is that's more federal. Classification staff, they really had to figure out if someone needed mental health care, substance abuse treatment, education, gang separation, protective custody. If we got it wrong, we see fights, extortion, all kinds of stuff, homicides. I mean, I've had several inmates that, because of poor classification, were killed. They were with people that they shouldn't have been with. So classification just isn't paperwork. It literally is a life and death decision. So more than half of all prison inmates, they arrive with significant mental health histories. This this that statistic really didn't surprise anybody. Where I worked, mental health systems, the symptoms showed up as aggression, paranoia, withdrawal, self harm. Self harm was a big one, and just refusal to follow orders. So this really makes early screening essential, promising treatment methods including individual therapy, group therapy, and these self-directed programs. Even inmates who avoided the traditional programs sometimes engaged in self-directed workbooks or journaling. I had one guy tell me that the only time he felt heard was in his therapy, and you could really see the difference in his behavior. Now, individual programs, they focus on the inmate's personal history, their mental health, and emotional regulation. And this insight-based therapy, this therapy help inmates develop really deep awareness of their triggers, their trauma, their thinking patterns. Many incarcerated men grew up in environments where emotional expression was dangerous. Therapy taught them how to understand and process their feelings rather than just react violently. And then you have the behavior modification. So this uses reinforcement to shape behavior. Good behavior uh, that equal privileges, job assignments, uh, more free movement. Bad behavior, loss of going to yard, loss of commissary, or or many times housing changes. Behavior modification was baked into daily operations later in my career. Rewards were scarce, so even the smallest privileges, like a I don't know, like a shower. Some inmates were only allowed to get showers once a week. That may move up to 2 showers. They could have their some of their property. These privileges were big. Getting his headphones, his TV, radio, stuff like that. That really motivates motivates an inmate to behave because that's all they have. So the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, it's one of the strongest evidence based practices in corrections. If it teaches inmates to recognize disordered thinking patterns, such as everyone's out to get me, violence is the only solution, I deserve what I take. Programs like this cognitive thinking skills program, they help inmates really slow down their impulsive reactions and really consider the consequences of their actions. And it really challenges antisocial thinking. When when CBT clicks, you can see an inmate pause before reacting, and that pause, such a small pause, can really help deter and eliminate aggressive behavior. So group programs, they help inmates, they help manage emotions, build communication skills, navigate conflicts, handle legal concerns, and build peer support networks. In high security environments, group programs were often a pressure release valve. They gave inmates a space to kind of decompress and just talk about stress in a constructive way. Staff could feel the difference on the housing units. They really can. Uh, I wasn't sold on all this when the mental health really started coming strong in the early 2000s. I wasn't on board. I'm like, no, this isn't going to work. It really did work. There's a lot to it. So, substance abuse is one of the largest drivers of criminal behavior. The RDAP, which is a residential drug abuse program, um, it's residential, it's CBT focused, it's a structured environment, and it's a separate housing unit. The CTS, the Community Treatment Services, it's really continuous treatment into halfway houses. It helps bridge the gap between prison and community. I saw many inmates who were violent, unpredictable, and constantly in trouble until they addressed their addiction. After after programming, after treatment, some were completely different people. So, therapeutic communities, um, they're immersive programs. Instead of 1 or 2 hours a week, inmates live the program all day. The amenity model includes observation, increased responsibility, and um, reentry preparation. Uh, theses create accountability, structure, peer mentorship, powerful tools in an environment where chaos is the norm. So anger management and art therapy. Anger management probably it's probably one of the most needed programs in prison. Uh, I could tell which inmates were working their anger management steps because they walked away from provocation. They used breathing techniques. They asked for help before exploding. Um, Arts therapy may sound soft, but the outcomes actually are real. Lowers depression. They have better emotional expression and fewer conflicts. These things really do work. Like I said, I wasn't sold until I actually saw the results. So self-help programs. These inmate-led programs, they kind of create leadership opportunities like Alcoholics Anonymous, Toastmasters, cultural identity groups such as the Native American Spiritual and Cultural Awareness Group, and of course, emotional maturity instruction. These programs build structure, discipline, and communication skills. Toastmasters, in particular, they transformed men who barely spoke into confident communicators. So this is interesting. We didn't have a Toastmasters program, but we had programs similar to this, and it really did help them. So self-help programs again includes service projects, faith-based groups, mentoring young inmates, and self-development classes. Peer mentorship reduced violence and eased tension, especially when older inmates took responsibility for guiding the young ones, the more impulsive ones. We had a program called Elder Statesman, and these inmates are the ones that were locked up for a specific amount, long time, and they actually did a really good job of in later on when the Elder Statesman became more of a mentoring program, because before it was more gang related. But when the older inmates with the experience, knowing that most of these guys were lifers, they weren't getting out, so they really had to deal with what the cards that they were given, whatever hand they were dealt, which was life in prison. So you better make the best of it. So they really help mentor the young inmates coming in, knowing that they're not going to get out for a long time. So again, make do with the hand you're dealt. All right, so prison educational, vocational, and religious programs. Um, prisons prisons must offer. So you get this, they have to do this. They have to offer education, they have to offer recreation, they have to offer health care, and they have to offer spiritual services. But inmates have to choose to participate. Those inmates who stayed busy were easier to supervise, far less likely to cause problems. Education programs, they include adult basic education. They included GED, college courses, social education. Research constantly and consistently shows that education reduces recidivism. I can never say that word. I'm gonna work on it. It definitely improves inmate behavior and it increases employment after the release. Um, and Pontiac getting a GED was a major turning point for many of these inmates. So vocational training. Vocational programs teach real world job skills. Many inmates have never had a legal job. So these vocational programs really fill in that gap. Um, my last assignment before retiring is I worked in Voc Auto, which is vocational auto. So that was the auto shop. I had 7 prison inmate workers. They were all in the Voc Auto, so they learned skills such as working on vehicles, doing general maintenance. They worked on all our fleet vehicles. Uh, these were some of the best inmate workers that I've ever had through my career because it actually paid really well for them. Wasn't a lot, but for an inmate, they got paid pretty good. But they learned some real world skills. Many of them weren't getting out, but this it gave them confidence, and that's so important, especially in a maximum security prison. Um, so animal programs, dog training, animal service. Um, these programs really reduce stress. They reduce aggression. Even inmates who struggle with authority respond very well to animal programs. Responsibility and empathy often flourish because of this. We didn't have this in our facility, but this several of our facilities in Illinois did have these dog training programs, and they were very beneficial. So religion, faith faith based faith based programs are among some of the strongest behavior stabilizers. Chaplains became crucial mediators, counselors, and just sources of hope. And some of the most respectful interactions I saw were between inmates and chaplains. And the inmates that really turned their life around. Uh, I met some really godly men in prison. It's very impressive. Um, a lot had to do with our religious programs. So medical services. Medical needs in prison are enormous. Infectious diseases, um, diabetes, heart conditions, chronic pain, elderly care. 20% of inmates report no medical visits, which is actually kind of alarming. At Pontiac, medical calls were constant, from toothaches to just life-threatening emergencies. We had really good medical services, so to speak. It's not like I probably wouldn't want to take my kid there, but for a prison, we actually had really good health care for inmates. So back to mental health services. Uh, Mental health staffing shortages are actually they're actually a nationwide crisis. When mental health needs aren't met in prison, you see more disciplinary problems. You see a lot more self harm. You definitely see aggression, and you definitely see a lot of psychotic episodes. Mental health units have to be staffed, secure, and compassionate, but it's a tricky balance. So visitation, libraries. Visitation improves mental health. It strengthens family ties. It lowers recidivism. Again, that word. I'll come up with a different word because I can't say that today. Um, but visitation can also be a big source of contraband. Big source of contraband. Especially in the minimum and medium security units. So not so much in maximum security prisons. Maximum security prisons, uh, they're probably towards the last 15 years, they went to no contact visits. So that really helped eliminate families and visitors bringing things in inmates. Uh, but in the minimum and medium security units, that's still a problem. Um, so prison libraries, they are they are essential for education. They're essential for legal access, and they're they're essential for recreation. Inmates don't have a whole lot to do, so they read. They read. Some inmates can probably read more books in a year than most people do their entire life, me included, because I don't read a whole lot of books. So prison industries. Um, Historically, industries used labor produced goods cheaply. Um, you probably always heard, the inmates make license plates. Well, actually, Pontiac, we used to a long time, but that was actually before I even started. We made the state's license plates. The inmates did that. We had a big metal shop, wood shop, all that. industries were industries were a big deal, especially in the 80s and early 90s. They would really do a whole lot of in-house stuff, uh, especially for the prison itself. They would make things for the prison itself, and then they would contract out to the state. So Hawes Cooper and Ashford Sumner's, these acts prevent um, interstate commerce of prison made goods. These really push prisons to rethink industries, unfortunately. That's why I say that they made a lot of stuff for the state, but they couldn't make it. They couldn't make it for for general commerce. You couldn't go buy something an inmate made from California in Illinois in a store. It goes against these, or it just that's where we really had to rethink how they did correctional industries. So these modern industries, they include manufacturing, recycling, clothing and textile work, and furniture production. So there's a lot of woodworking going on in the prison. These programs really help build discipline. They help build structure, which was much needed in really high security prisons. So treatment works best when programs are well timed and they're matched to inmate needs. They're delivered consistently and they're reinforced with uh, vocational educational opportunities. And and the research matches really what I've witnessed when inmates engage in multiple programs at once. Positive change just accelerates. So, little summary, chapter 9 here. Chapter 9 really reveals that prisons are more than containment facilities. They're rehabilitation engines, and these programs again include reduce violence, improve institutional safety, lower recidivism. Here I said it. They build hope and they really prepare inmates for reentry. Um, Again, in my experience, the inmates who succeeded after release had one thing in common. They took their program seriously and they put in the work. So thank you for joining me here in correctional programs and services, and I'll see you again in chapter 10 for parole and the release to the community.